All right, this is the next video in a little series here that I'm working on automating job costing and benchmarking for painting companies. So in the previous one, I kind of showed how to set up. I'm going off of a Google Sheet that a client has. So I'm going off of a client that we work with, and this is what they fill out for every job. And there's actually more like pre-work that gets done to calculate this. But this is something that takes, between 5 and 10 minutes per job, and you have to do this every time. And it's just basically a bunch of collecting of data and putting it in here. And all of this can be automated. So what I'm diving into in this video is the next part of this, which is coming up with a pushback process to have that fully automated so that our pushback hours get pulled in correctly into the pushback column here. So I created a table here inside of the project management. And the thing to discuss first is who does push or what does pushback affect. So the first thing right away is it affects a project. So we need to connect or link our pushback record with the correct process or project. So if we say that we want to, from the project, we want to look up the estimator, for example, and we also want to look up the crew leader. And let's say we also want to look up the job leader. We could pull in the estimated hours. And there we go. So now we have, just by assigning a project, I'm going to be able to get all of that other information pulled in here through this lookup. But the next thing is that the crew is going to submit these hours. So they're going to look at it and say, hey, there's too much, there's more work here than is budgeted for hours wise. So we want to put in a field that is called pushback hours requested. And this is just going to be a number that would get entered by the crew leader. So we can go ahead and put that in. That's just going to be 1 point or one decimal place. So we could say it's going to be 5.5 hours. And pushback hours approved. And that's going to be also a number. And that would need to get selected by the supervisor or whoever's approving that number. So let's say maybe there was 5.5 pushback hours. By default, we could say, I want to fill that in with how many, but if I said I'm going to switch it to 3, I could do that. The last one here is the status. So pushback request status. And this is just going to be a simple drop down. So we wanted to say requested, approved, declined. So for this one, it would default. We're going to have this field default to requested. And then someone would have to come in and switch that to approved or declined. And actually, let's do one more field that would just say, we'll call this notes, pushback request notes. And we can make this one a long text field. And so now we have all of the elements that are needed for a pushback process to exist in a painting business. The last thing I do over here is we'll put a formula together that is going to name this pushback request correctly, so it has a unique name. And we'll say that this is we're going to pull in the project name and then do the little ampersand sign and put on maybe the crew leader that's requesting it. So this would be crew leader. And then let's put how many hours they're asking for. And we're going to do hours approved. So that's all fine. And oh, actually, one more, almost forgot. We need to pull in a date field here. So creation or requested date. And there we go, default to current date. So when it comes in, it's just going to automatically populate. Like if I put a new record in here, it's going to automatically pick that. And then this one, we can say we want to default No, we can't. So actually, here's an interesting. Um, well, I'll go to the form of what this is going to look like. So now, if we want someone to submit the pushback hours, what I like to do is go to the interface and think about where would somebody submit a request for pushback. So they're going to do it on the production interface, which is going to be based on this events tab that we have. So we need to get to a place or build the form that's going to allow people to submit the pushback hours. And the way I like to do that is with Fillout, because Fillout allows you to have non-paid Airtable users build the forms. So first thing here is I can go into my account here, and we're going to make a new form, and we're going to do this based on, it's going to be similar to an AWO. So I'm going to use this as a starting point, and we're going to call this pushback request. And when I come in here, we're going to have this say new pushback request. And then the project here is going to be auto-filled from the project record ID. We want this, we don't need a title of it. We can get rid of that. We don't need, do we need, no, we don't need an amount. And this is going to be pushback hours requested. And then the AWO description, we'll change this to pushback description. And we don't need a backup either. So super simple form here. Just what's the project that this is tied to, what's the number of hours requested, and what's the description. Now for the integration here, we need to remap this. So instead of picking that, we're going to delete the integration. And we want to pick Airtable and then pick pushback. So we're mapping the fill out form to the pushback table. We want to create a new record when that is made. And let's check out our URL parameters. We still have the project record ID. So that's all great. Now here we have project. We're going to autofill with the project record ID. And then we need to make sure that this is mapped to the project field. The pushback hours requested is going to be mapped to the pushback hours requested. Pushback description is going to be mapped to the pushback request notes. Let's change it to match. And so now we're going to publish this, and we want to copy this. And now we're going to go back to the table. And remember that we want this to populate here, but we need to have it based on the project. So we're going to go to where we have all of our buttons. And I put in a bunch of different buttons for different purposes here. We're going to have one here that says new AWO somewhere. Here we go. So we got the AWO form button. I'm going to add in a new, actually we'll duplicate this one, and we're going to call this one a new pushback request URL. And this is a button. It's going to be called pushback request. And this is going to be the new URL that I just copied. So I want to paste in my new URL. Whoops. And I want to keep that project record ID. So I'm going to only do this part. So I kept that the same. Now I have project record ID. I'm going to save this. I should change the color. Let's make this button light blue. So now I have a pushback request button. If I click on Chris Kiefer's pushback request, it's going to pull up the fill out form. It's going to autofill with Chris Kiefer's project. I say I am submitting an outrageous 25 hours. This is ridiculous. And I submit. Then I go over here, and inside of the where am I at? The pushback table, you can see I have a new request in here. We can delete these empty records. For 25 hours, it's requested, the notes here, and the requested date. Now, the last thing that I think would be super cool is this is how many were requested. This is what's approved. What if I just want to approve what they request? Because that oftentimes happens. It'd be nice to just autofill this. So this is a perfect opportunity for a really small automation here. And we can make a very simple automation that says autofill, or say pushback autofill with requested hours when blank. And so the first thing we're going to do is when record matches conditions, and the conditions are going to be requested or no, approved pushback hours is empty and project is not empty. So if the project is not empty and the pushback hours is empty, we want to run this. And so here you can see the one that we just did, this is empty. So back in here, we're going to say in the automations, we are going to pull or do a quick, simple update here with update record. And we just need to say in the pushback table, I want to take the record ID of the record that started this whole thing, and I want to choose the approved hours, and I want to fill it dynamically with the pushback hours requested value. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. Super, super simple automation here. And I'm just going to say when the pushback request comes through, this will autofill the approved hours with the requested hours. So there's my short little description to make it easier in the future. And now you can see that if I have a value here and I delete it, automation will run and update. So if we look at this from the user interface perspective, I want to, in my interface for my crews, I want to view this as somebody else, not me. And so what I want to see is in the production side as David, I want to see the projects that he's working on. So let's search for David, or sorry, Chris. So here's my test project. And when I click on this, I have all my buttons here. I need to add another button to this interface here. So let's go ahead and click this button, and we are going to add the pushback request URL button. So they can now submit a request here. And now I've got my hold harmless, my AWO form, my pushback form. So there's all that. I also want to make sure that this pulls up on the events. So if I click on, once again, let's do Kiefer. I have this view here, and I need to pull in the shortcut. So we're going to have pushback, and it's not there. So the reason it's not there is because on the events table, we have to pull in or look up that button from so here's all of our buttons, and we're going to look up one additional one from projects. So when we associate a project, we want to also pull in that pushback URL button. We're going to add that field, and then I'm going to move it. And because it doesn't allow buttons here, I have to make another button. So we're going to do this off of the AWO button, duplicate it. We'll change this one to new pushback request. We're going to call this request pushback hours. And the formula that we want to use is the new pushback request URL. And we're going to change this to that light blue. All right, so now I have my new pushback request now in the interface like we were just at, because I now have the event itself. I can pull in a pushback request URL button. Page is called event detail. And now on all these, if I click into an event, there's my pushback request. And again, if I test this on the one here, I submit that pushback request, submit my time of 40 hours. This is another test. I just want to show you, here's our database of pushback hours. And we go to pushback. And now I'm going to hit submit. And there it is, auto-filled with 40. So I could say, actually, I'm only going to give you 20 hours and approve this. There we go. All right, so final thing here. So now we've put in a bunch of hours here. I've approved some, declined some that are still requested. The last thing that I want to do with back to our job costing piece here. So the way it all ties back is that now that we have that pushback column, if I go to my benchmarking sheet, I can now officially roll up. So I'm going to change this to a roll up field. And we're going to make this roll up based on the pushback table. And we want to roll up the approved pushback hours, but only that meets certain conditions. And that condition would be that the status is approved. So if the status is approved, show those hours. And you can see here, 20 hours is what's being shown. If I go to the pushback process here, I can see I've got 25 hours declined, 20 hours approved. If I change this also to approved and go back to that project, now it's going to show me pushback hours of 23. How cool is that? The final piece is we need our crew leader or supervisor to be the one that approves pushback requests. So in a separate video, I will make just a simple view here of how you can have your supervisor see a list of all pushback requests that they need to approve in a nice simple view. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was valuable. Drop a comment down below. What did you find valuable? What would you like me to cover next? Do you have any other questions? This is another video in this series of how we're going to automate job costing. Hopefully this was valuable. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us at helloboolean.com. Again, my name is Chris at Boolean, where we free you up to do what you love.